In 1978, when Kenner released the first 12 Star Wars action figures to a public hungry for Star Wars product, Princess Leia was one of the initial 12. And in 1978, it seems unlikely a toy line for Star Wars would not have included the sole leading woman of the film, who was important to the overall story. At the time, women action figures were normal and widely produced as part of most toy lines. Even G.I. Joe managed to release a woman in the form of a nurse figure in the late 1960s. Mego, Adventure People, and Tonka Play People were among the many toy lines that heavily included women figures. Kenner's own $6 million man line had branched out to include the Bionic Woman as a compatible figure with Steve Austin, Oscar Goldman, Bigfoot, and Maskatron. And for the length of the original Star Wars line, Princess Leia received variant refreshes almost every year. While we didn't get Yavin Ceremony Leia in the 1979 line extension, for The Empire Strikes Back, there were 2 releases for Leia, both in her Bespin gown in 1980, as well as Leia in her Hoth uniform in 1981. There were no 1982 Leias. The only 2 other Empire Strikes Back costumes were Bespin Escape Leia and Medical Frigate Leia. My assumption/opinion was that to Kenner, and likely parents of the 1980s, both of these variants would have been too close to the original 1978 Leia and Hoth Leia, as they're both subtle costume adjustments. So kids could just easily reuse those, especially since at this time, Kenner re-released every figure in the line regularly throughout the length of the vintage line, just with updated cards to reflect the current movie. In 1983, Kenner released Princess Leia in Bausch disguise, and in 1984, Princess Leia in indoor gear. When the original Power of the Force line was released in 1985, there was no Princess Leia variant. My commentary here is that the only Leias left from Return of the Jedi at this point were Princess Leia in her Ewok village dress and the Jabba's prisoner outfit. In 1985, it's not likely either of those would have been heavily considered, as parents in the 1980s leaned a bit more conservatively, and Leia in a bikini probably wouldn't have played well. It doesn't always play well now. Add to this that behind the scenes, Kenner's attempt at Yarna Del Gargan figure with all 6 of her breasts was vetoed by Lucasfilm. For more on Yarna Del Gargan's 1980 non-figure Doom, check out the video on her by Andrew at Gayties Toys. In discussing this video with Andrew, he also pointed out that vintage Kenner often released Han and Leia in pairs, Hoth Leia and Bespin Han, and Indoor Leia and Indoor Han. From 1978 to 1985, Kenner produced 5 Princess Leias, 1 Size Snoodles, and 1 EV-99. 7 women action figures in the lineup is actually pretty good, especially since counting Aunt Beru, the Ion Control Operator, Ula, Yarna, and Mon Mothma, there were no other significant on-screen women in the entire original trilogy. When Star Wars toys drew to a close in 1985, the shelves were stocked with Teela's and Evil Lynn's, the entire Princess of Power Wave 1 lineup, Golden Girl and the Guardians of the Gemstones, and several prominent women in G.I. Joe Real American Hero. Even GoBots had Pathfinder, Crasher, Smallfoot, Sparky, Spacey, and Vamp. The most prominent toy lines included women, knowing that girls as well as boys wanted women figures to recreate their favorite storylines and play patterns learned from the movies and TV shows that helped keep these properties in children's imaginations. But then came the dark time for women figures. But not if you were a fan of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. April O'Neil would have had most of us thinking that women figures were still a thing, even though other toy lines seemed to have forgotten this. Even Kenner did several lines lacking the women that were so important to the stories these figures were made to reenact and expand on during playtime. Kenner's pivot to fewer women and no women in their lines seems to have started with the Superpowers toy line in 1984. In all 3 waves, despite a huge variety of popular and well-known women characters in DC Comics, Wonder Woman is the only one released in Superpowers. Kenner's original proposal to DC that got them the license included sublines for Wonder Woman, Teen Titans, which would have featured Wonder Girl, Raven, and Starfire, and a substantial presence for both Supergirl and Lois Lane. Supergirl was allegedly part of Wave 4, which never materialized due to lagging cells in Wave 2 and Wave 3. Perhaps if Kenner had included Supergirl and other popular figures of the ladies from Teen Titans or Wonder Woman's arch-foe, the Cheetah, or even Giganta, Catwoman, or Batgirl, all familiar to non-comics fans due to Saturday morning cartoons, this line wouldn't have started fizzling out during Wave 2, which was heavy with newish and unfamiliar Fourth World characters, and by Wave 3, characters created for the toy line such as Golden Pharaoh and Cyclotron, who nobody knew about and most of us didn't care about. Later Kenner toy lines like Real Ghostbusters and RoboCop did include the women characters of those properties, but more significantly, other lines like Police Academy, Robin Hood Prince of Thieves, and Beetlejuice did not. By 1995, when Kenner released Power of the Force 2, their recent lines The Mask, The Shadow, and Waterworld did not included any of the women prominently featured in those movies. While Cameron Diaz in The Mask and Penelope Ann Miller in The Shadow may not have been action enough for Kenner's taste, the women characters in Terminator and Waterworld were important to the overall story. And at least one of the Waterworld women made it so far into production that she appeared in Kenner's toy booklets. For all of these reasons, in 1995, when early pictures of Power of the Force 2 started showing up, including early cardback art, the lack of Princess Leia was a reason for concern for some Star Wars fans. Mainly those of us for whom Leia was our favorite character and central to our Star Wars experience. In the Star Wars toy drought from 1985 through 1995, there hadn't been many Star Wars toys, but Leia was often prominently included. And this time, we got a vinyl character statue from Out of Character, a line featured at Suncoast video stores across the US, and Bindums. But the less said about the Bindums, the better. There were also Leia offerings from Galoob's various Micro Machines product lines in the year before Power of the Force 2. However, toward the end of 1995, when figures did start hitting shelves and commercials and magazines such as Wizard and the Star Wars Insider started covering Power of the Force 2, pictures of the Princess Leia Organa figure from the initial 9 figures began to surface. And just like that, I found myself wondering, why does she look so bad? To say the sculpting on this figure was questionable is an understatement. In fan circles, this rendition of the character came to be known as Monkey Leia or Monkey-Faced Leia. While much of the sculpting on Power of the Force 2 early waves is questionable, Han, Ben, and Lando fared much better than the others. Even Luke came out better than Leia. There are rumors that Carrie Fisher hated this figure and its scarcity was because of this, but there is nothing officially confirmed to back this up. And based on the way toy companies worked and the Star Wars licensing that Carrie Fisher signed off on in the 1970s worked, it's not like her disapproval would have been enough to block a figure. The fact this figure showed up plentiful throughout 1996 and early 1997, including being repackaged on green cards with all the other original Wave figures, would indicate Carrie Fisher in no way blocked the figure. And she never publicly dropped an opinion on this specific figure's likeness. She did occasionally drop shade about having signed away her likeness and George Lucas owning her face. The overly muscled look of the first few waves of Power of the Force did not last long. Kenner did course correct and pivoted to a more accurate sculpting for the figures and better overall likenesses, starting in late 1996, which would have been around the time feedback from the first waves would have been able to impact the figures based on how toy production timelines work. One of the first figures they redid was Princess Leia Organa, and in 1998 fans were rewarded with 2 different options for this version of Leia. One is part of the Power of the Force 2 freeze-frame carded figures, and one as a 2-pack in the Princess Leia collection. Both were not only decades better than the original Power of the Force 2 Leia, but they are among some of the best Leia sculpts in this outfit that we've received in the 3 3/4 range to this date. At the time of preparing this video, Hasbro's Vintage Collection is preparing to release this version of Leia, and based on toy photography we've seen, it's possible we'll get the definitive version of this Leia with the face sculpt that we've wanted since at least 1995, when likenesses is something toy collectors actually started to care about. Now, with the ghost of Toy Leia past explored and a hint of her future, let's unbox and compare some Power of the Force 2 Leias. During the course of the Power of the Force 2 toy line, Kenner released 4 different versions of Princess Leia and her New Hope outfit. The first one, of course, is this one, the main subject of this video. And then in 1998, both of these were released. This is basically the resculpt of this one. And then this is part of the Princess Leia collection, which had 4 different sets with Leia and Luke in their ceremonial outfit, Wicket, and then Princess Leia actually in her Ewok dress, not in the poncho, and then Han and Leia in their Bespin attire. And for those keeping track, this came both with a silver lining and with gold right here. There's a running change. Yeah, these were sort of the replacements for this one. And the year this came out, Kenner was redoing a lot of the year 1 figures like this, who didn't look quite so good with all of the extra muscles and stuff. So, and then in 1999, as part of the last wave of the Power of the Force figures, these released at the same time as Episode 1. We got Princess Leia with a ComTech chip and her hood up. And this one has soft goods instead of the plastic. Alright, here is Power of the Force Leia. She came on the standard orange card. And kind of what she looked like right in the beginning. They did re-release her on a green card with a hologram. Same figure, and same picture, just green and with the hologram. And as you can see on the back of this, and this was sort of one of the waves that was going out at the time they redid these in 97. So basically, around the time of the special edition movies, they refreshed the cards. And they did that Kenner thing that they had done in the original vintage line, where they went and re-released all of the figures on new cards so that they were out there. And so let's look at this one. This is how she originally looked on store shelves. She came with the 2 blasters. This one is pretty movie accurate-ish. This one's just made up. She never had a weapon like that one in the movie. And then, as you can see, based on the card back, this is probably one of the earliest to ship in 1995. Because she's not even on the back of the card. The first few waves went out with just the 8. Leia was not on there, which was why there was a rumor for a while there would not be Leia released as part of the Power of the Force 2 toy line. We have a bio, which gives her height, her status, Princess of Alderaan, Imperial Senator, Cell Leader of the Rebel Alliance. And then this is, I think this bio is pretty untouched by the changes that Disney brought when they redid everything. I don't see anything there that doesn't stand up, but there you are. So there she is. And again, and then of course this was the replacement with all new likeness. So they, obviously it was such a thing that they wanted to call that out. And again, this one is dated. This one is dated 97, but it didn't actually start hitting shelves until 98. So it's possible there were a few places that got these a little early, but these didn't hit any of my shelves until early 1998. So, and then of course, the Princess Leia collection one. So we're gonna open these right here, because these are the bulk. I have one of these loose. If you look right here on the belt, there are 3 distinct lines. Sometimes you'll see a reference to 3-band Leia. That's what that refers to, is those 3 bands of the belt. Only the 2. I don't know if that was a running change or if it was just some sort of weird softening of the mold, or if they had to redo this mold. It's actually, I mean, again, it's been referred to as Monkey-Faced Leia. I don't actually think it really looks that monkey-faced. It's just not, I think some of it is paint app. I think if the eyebrows weren't quite so dark, if the lip maybe not quite so pink, and the nose is it's a little bigger, but I think this is a paint app fill. Because if you look, there's some pretty good detail in the actual sculpt. And it's pretty decent attempt at Princess Leia, Carrie Fisher's likeness at a time when likenesses were not a big deal in toys. So this technically should have cut it. It's just all the adult collectors who started buying this line wanted a little bit more. So for kids, this would have been fine. If Power of the Force 2 had been a 2 or 3 year line, like most Kenner movie lines were at the time, they didn't expect Star Wars to hit big again. Compared to the redo that came in 98, well, 97. And as you can see, like, there's not a lot of difference between the actual sculpt. It's sort of the same profile. It's just this one has the second one right here. The buns are definitely better. Her star puffs look way more accurate. They're way more full. And it looks like almost the same nose. This one looks almost like they took the first one and just resculpted the hair on top of it, and again added the cheeks and changed the mouth. But it looks like the same nose. I would guess that they probably built, because these would have been sculpted in wax or some other, either wax or some sort of clay. So, and then the last one, and this one frankly is probably my actual least favorite. This one looks very, and I think it's the lack of the white in the eyes. Like it actually looks closer to one of the Kenner the original vintage sculpts because of the lack of white in the eye. But again, not as much difference as you would think. So in conclusion, the first Power of the Force 2 Leia figure was not great. It suffers from a convergence of different things. A toy industry shifting from action figures made just for kids and toys made to cater to both kids and the adult collectors looking to indulge in nostalgia for the properties and stories we love via consumerism. In the 1990s, outside of DC and Marvel, most toy lines were disposable and short-term, coming and going quickly. They were attached to movies that, even if they had hit big, weren't going to generate several years of success like the original Star Wars had. Most lines would have 1 or 2 years long at best, going away after the movie was gathering dust on a video store shelf, or the TV show had been canceled and banished to USA Cartoon Express. This was especially true at Kenner, which, because of the $6 Million Man, the Bionic Woman, Star Wars, and Strawberry Shortcake in the late 1970s and early 1980s, had become increasingly reliant on licensed property to lesser and lesser success over time. A trend that continues to this day. With all of that said, I do remember for myself when I first got this Leia figure in late December 1995, and I took her and the rest of my Power of the Force 2 score from KB Toys and Walmart that day, where I blew through my entire Christmas bonus and all of the Christmas money from my grandparents to pick up all of the figures and all of the vehicles available at that time. I really enjoyed this figure. And I still have many of them mint on card and loose to this day. Power of the Force 2 could never capture the imagination the way the original Kenner line did, but I definitely remember getting my first hits of nostalgia collecting this line and picking up all of the vehicles I hadn't had as a kid, and getting super excited anytime they released a figure we'd never seen in the original Kenner line. It's easy to look back at Power of the Force 2 Leia and the rest of the Power of the Force 2 line and roll our eyes and make fun of it. But its impact on the toy industry and its part in the creation of the adult toy collector demographic is massive. But all of that is a much bigger subject for another video at another time. Until next time, this is Allison Choi, Retro Toy Princess, and I'll see you in the next one. If you like this video, you should consider hitting the like and subscribing, and set the bell notification so you'll be alerted to any new videos in the future. Thanks for watching.